This is Ahern. Thomas Ahern. He's born in 1855 down on the Breton Flats. He's one of the first gentlemen to be born down there. There's an earlier young woman. But this guy is absolutely fascinated by electricity. He's one of those kids that was taking things apart and putting them almost back together again. Anything to do with electricity, he was absolutely fascinated by it. And as a young man, he goes off and becomes a telegraph operator at Parliament. And he's sending out the daily record of, as Hansard essentially, he's sending it out by telegraph. He there meets a gentleman called Soper, S-O-P-E-R, Warren Soper, and who's also a telegraph operator. They work for different companies, but they decide that he will be the brains of a company and Soper will be the business side of the company. It's funny, these two both knew Morse code. So they had a party trick there where I would ask this lady here if I could borrow something, an item of hers, and Soper is standing at the back with his back to it, and I take the item that you've got, and it says on the back to, what's your name? Joni. To Joni, with love from Thomas, and I hope I got that right. And up the front, Ahern is standing, and so Soper is standing with your item at the back, and all of a sudden he says, "What am I holding in my hand?" And Ahern says, it's a watch, it's a lady's watch, and on the back it says to Joni from Thomas. Everybody's amazed. Soper is blinking in Morse code. Little party trick that they used to do. Now, these gentlemen, between them, there's their business on Spark Street, this Ahern and Soper. They basically are the utility million. Every town needs utilities, power, light, gas, etc. And these gentlemen corner the market on it. They corner the market on it. Later in life, Ahern, for instance, organizes the first telephonic cross-Canada phone call. They make a lot of money putting up telegraph lines, but Ahern actually started with Booth, but he then goes on to become fascinated by transportation, electric transportation. This is the gentleman who introduced the streetcar. Previous to the electrification of transport, there was the Ottawa railway, track railway or road railway, and it was basically a carriage pulled by horses. And they became quite a large company. It's sort of the Uber of its day. But Ahern he goes and buys a couple of carriages, and this is the inaugural 1895. This is the inaugural opening of the line. The first one going down Bank Street as far as Abbotsford House, which is where that's why Abbotsford House is there. Do you know the old person's home that's down there? Well, that was the last stop down there. But the main contribution that the streetcar makes to Ottawa is the suburb. The suburb. Before, you had to be able to walk or horse to work, so you had to get up pretty early. With the streetcar, away you go. You can get up a little bit later, hop on the streetcar, head downtown, and go to work. Notice the facial hair. Every one of them's got this big mustache that So they're the hipsters of their day, but it's come back. It's come back to facial hair. And they're all wearing a hat. The thing you notice in these old photographs is how many people are wearing hats. It doesn't come back until the baseball cap, really. I remember going into the town cinema, and there was a movie called Hoop Dreams. It was about basketball. And I thought, why is the entire audience facing the wrong way? And they were all jocks with their baseball caps on, turned the other way. But just a little historical aside, I like these. Who made the hat disappear? Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was the first president not to wear a hat. And it got taken up, and that's why all of us here did. Yes?
Just a question about how fast would the train travel?
Oh, I don't know. That's an interesting one. Fairly, well, of course, it's stopping a lot. Probably as quick as a bus. And of course, you can see the electrification here. When they got to where they were going, they just flipped this over. It was the same both ends. It was sort of a push and pull, a woof and puff. It was the same both ends, and you could just flip it over. And there's a $2 fine if your phone goes off, and a $5 fine if you answer it. The other thing that happened with the streetcars is that it now became possible to get out of town towards Britannia, which was then cottage country. And you could go out for the day down there to the beach, and these are people on their way. And in fact, the covered stop for the streetcar is still there. It's still there at Lakeside Gardens. If you park your car, you'll walk past this. It's just a building like that, really. It's open-sided, but that's where the streetcar used to. You had to change streetcars in Westboro, at Westboro Station, which is now a condominium block, which is called Westboro Station. But so here's people out for the day, having a nice day out because of the streetcar. And the other thing that it did was they delivered the mail around town. There's the post office. Obviously, they just loaded up. So there were these little ones that would just deliver the mail around town. 2 deliveries a day. Yeah. And there's Spark Street at the height of the streetcar era. Don't you? I want to live there. I don't want to. You know, I don't want to live there. Yeah. I think we'll take a little break there, if we may. The last streetcar is in May. I beg your pardon, April 1959. Was anybody else in the room there? Yeah, my mom took me down to see the last streetcar. Yeah. Because I used to go downtown on the streetcar by myself to go. My mom I had money in this hand for the cinema on Spark Street, because you could dump your kid for Saturday shopping. But I'd go by myself, and on the other hand, I had the money for the streetcar. We were living in Manor Park at the time. We were living in Elmvale Acres at the time. So Mum would have to take me down to Bank Street to get and I would take it down. And then I'd go to the cinema, and I don't think, 9 years old, I don't think you'd let a 9-year-old do this now, and then we would go to the YMCA, which was opposite the Ottawa Public Library, the main branch in that building there. That was the YMCA then. And they'd give us a bean feast, and then they'd put us in the swimming pool. 50 boys, that's a mistake. That's a mistake. But I saw the last streetcar run. And they actually, what had happened was that Ahern and Soper, the Ottawa streetcar company, sold to OC Transpo. They sold about 60 or 70 streetcars to them, and over 100, I beg your pardon, over 100 streetcars and about 60 buses that had already come by. So that's the beginning when Ahern and Soper sell over to OC Transpo in 46, I think, 47.
How much was there?
15 cents.
15 cents?
Yeah, 15 cents. In the first, to go out, it was 15 cents to go out to Britannia Park. To go out to, all the way out to Britannia Park, it was 15 cents. Yeah.
What were the reasons for going to buses from streetcars?
Well, to tell you the truth, I think it's a huge mistake. Toronto's managed to hold on to them. And it was the overcrowding. You've got to remember that there were also, if you went across from east-west in Ottawa, there were 23 railway crossings that you had to go through, and there's stops for the streetcars. And the car is starting to take over, it's starting to redesign the urban landscape, which it basically did. As the computer has redesigned the interior of places, the car redesigned the outside, for sure. So I think it was a case of overcrowding, basically, that the street lines had to come up. They used to run down Rideau. I have a photograph at home of them tearing up the tracks on Rideau. But I agree with you. I think that your question is, we should have kept them.
Yeah.
I think absolutely we should have kept them. I agree with you completely. There is one that's being renovated that they have. And the streetcar depot was out by the city centre. There's a great big building opposite the city centre. And in there's one of the streetcars, 696, that they're actually renovating. And they're thinking, every now and then they say, let's run it down Byron. That's why Byron is so wide, and it has those sort of little parks down the middle. Where those little parks are is where the streetcar line was. That's why it's like that. With people going out to Holland Avenue, etc. So there's some talk of bringing it back as a tourist attraction. That maybe they'll run one down there, but that's Disneyland. That's not. Yeah. During the period, the 1890s are a very crowded, 1880, 1890s. There's a lot of city growth. For instance, the Humane Society is founded in 1888. The Children's Aid Society, 1893. The Home for Friendless Women. I know, good God. Hopefully they all made friends with each other. Opened 1888, and the Society of Friends for the Poor, 1889. There's no welfare state at this point. There's no welfare state at this point. The Purley and Rideau Veterans Health Center. Purley was one of the lumber barons, and now the Purley Home, of course, just across the street. Yeah, it's just at the back of the church, right? That's the Purley, isn't it?
But it was the Purley.
It was the Purley, wasn't it? Oh, they've changed it already? Oh, okay. Originally, he had the Purley Home for the Incurables that was downtown on Wellington. The YMCA, 1897. The Ottawa Evening Journal began as a 4-page newspaper, 1885. And went on to become the Journal, of course. It was the Evening Journal, and then it was the Journal, and then it disappeared. The 1887, the Ottawa Naturalist Club starts, which is still going. The Britannia Aquatic Club starts in 1887, and then it eventually becomes the Britannia Boathouse down there. Britannia is still very much a village. As I told you last week, it was, I'm blanking again, Le Breton, who had the 600 acres that was given to him as a captain, and started Britannia. And it still has that village feel. You sort of feel like you're crossing into a village. And of course, the yacht club down there now. Yeah. And the Royal Ottawa Golf Club is 1891. And then in 1887, skiing is introduced to the area by a guy called Lord Frederick Hamilton, who demonstrated a set of skis at Rideau Hall and got laughed at. They were I'm not trying that. Down a slope. And the curling club, still going again, of course, 1888. And then 1895, we'll have a look at this next week, but in 1895, there is a movement to get Ottawa a library. It's lagging way behind on having a library. And a gentleman by the name of Otto Klotz, who had been mayor, was institutionally pursuing us having a public library. We're in it now. But he got the council to set aside $500 to start investigating whether they could even open a reading room, which they had then. The Mechanics Institute had these series of reading rooms. Finally, they had to put it to it had to go to a bylaw vote, and on December the 4th, 1899, they had a vote on council for the levying of a levy for the erection of a public library. It was voted down. It was voted down, but we will see next week that they did. Well, we know because we're in it, that it finally succeeded. This is West End Park. As we saw with Britannia, there was a series of recreation. I remember once after I'd written the book on Le Breton Flats and was advocating that Le Breton Flats be a park like our Stanley Park, that like Vancouver Stanley Park, that I said, well, you know what the purpose of parks is? And I said, well, yeah, he said, no, you're wandering nature, it's all very nice, and he said, no, it's to give cities to go have somewhere to go to think, which I love. I think that's, yeah. So much of your thinking is spent in the objective mode. To be able to move into the subjective mode, apparently you need to be in nature. Most of the great compositions, classical compositions, Elgar, etc., were composed in their heads in parks or in nature. Most of the writing I've done actually was composed in nature. I live in the Gatineau Hills and have done for quite a while. But so Ottawa needed somewhere to go, a park system and a recreation system. So this was the bandstand. And the first commercial showing of movies in Canada, Montreal had a very small one, but the first commercial scale showing of movies took place in Canada, took place on that bandstand. Using Edison's Vitascope. There's actually a letter that I have a copy of Edison thanking the Holland brothers, Holland Street, and the Holland Farm. Andrew had been down to New York, and they had those ones where you cranked it, and the people did the, so exactly like that. And the Holland brothers brought up the Vitascope, as it was called, and they had a showing, and it was well attended. People were a bit mesmerized by the whole thing, because at one point they'd probably banned it in Texas now, but there was a kiss, and these two heads slowly came together, and there was a kiss, and everybody was totally shocked. And then there was a train coming towards, and everybody ducked as this train came hurtling towards them. But it was a huge success. So the first introduction of commercial introduction of cinema in Canada taking place in that park. Look at that. That's King Edward. The street that they cannot get right. The street that they cannot get right. This is the Ottawa Improvement Commission. The Ottawa Improvement Commission is started by your Aherns, some of the lumber barons, etc. And Ottawa grew in an extremely haphazard way. It's not planned. It's not like Washington or anything. It's not planned as such. So it's gradually realized, particularly with the sawdust and the mills and all these trains, that, like as I said, there were close to 23 level crossings in downtown Ottawa. It took you forever to get from one side to the other. And so they decided that they needed to give it a spring clean. So the Ottawa Improvement Commission was created. And this is an example of what they attempted to do. They also cleaned up along the canal, which was a real mess. But so that's when we get the Queen Elizabeth driveway, etc. But this is what this idea of putting. Do you remember I told you that that the unit of measure was the chain for the? It's the width. Those of you that play cricket, it's the width of it's the length of a cricket pitch. But this is a chain across. And this is the number 5 fire station. It's now got Lepage, Armand Lepage, written on the side of it, but this is the number 5 fire station. And when I was doing my walks around Ottawa, of course I walked down King Edward, that's when I found this postcard. And the number 5 fire station was, you could barely read it. So I suggested in the column that it could use a fresh coat of paint, and then about a month later I went down and they had, now you can clearly read it, it's the number 5 fire station, which is my only architectural contribution to Ottawa. So far. But see, that's actually, although it's an avenue, it's named after King Edward, that's actually a boulevard. That's a boulevard. Which, remember that people are, this is 1895, that people are strolling down there. And then there's Côte de Sable, there's Sandy Hill at the far end. No, Sandy Hill. Sandy Hill. That's going south. We're looking south, yeah.
What's the tower?
It's a fire station, that's for drying the hoses. You've got to dry your hoses when you get back. You can't, you got to get them up in the air. There's still one over in Hull on Maisonneuve. Yes, thank you. There's still a tower there, a hose drying tower. Yeah. Yes. It's dirt road.
That's a dirt road.
It's dirt road.
The center for walking in then?
Yes, there's a. If you've ever been to Havana or Barcelona, there's streets that you can walk down here, and there's benches and shrubbery, etc. Yeah. There's a lot of walking going on there, not quite as I say, the car is completely redesigned, I think probably to the detriment of the urban landscape. Did you miss an episode? Then go to rogerstv.com and watch The History of Ottawa according to Phil Jenkins online anytime. Thanks for watching. Thank you.